and my dad had an organic vegetable farm. That was their romance story, and they wanted to grow food. And my dad found himself in the commercial geoduck fishery, so harvesting state geoducks. And he said, there has to be a better way, there has to be something more sustainable. And so that really got them. They were talking to clam farmers and shellfish farmers and working with Sea Grant and trying to figure out what to do to make their dreams come true. And so here we are, 35 years later, at their dream. So we work with other farms to educate, and this is a nationwide group to educate lawmakers and people in power about how climate change is affecting us in the farming world. And I think that our voices are important because we are coastal, so sea level rise and storm surge and things like that are affecting people besides heat. Yeah, it means, I kind of always think about it in three things. It means it has to be sustainable for the people, right? We want our employees to have jobs that they can count on, that are reliable and safe. There's nothing more important to us than clean water. We can't farm without it. You know, the water has to be clean to harvest shellfish. So making sure the bays are clean, and that means not only what we do, but the laws that are put in place to protect the Puget Sound. That's a really important part for us. And it's, you know, the shellfish, we don't have to feed them anything. They get all their food from phytoplankton that's grown by the sun. It takes very little fresh water to do this process. So, you know, they actually help clean the bay by balancing the phytoplankton levels in the bay. That restorative process of shellfish aquaculture is like, we can keep planting the same areas. We don't have to worry about crop rotation and things like that.
They're on generation 5 here in Western Washington, which is now generation 6. I just saw some of generation 6 working in the kitchen this summer, so they're starting to come around and work here on the farm. And the family members at this point do a little bit of everything. There are some that work in the kitchen, some that work in the marketing department, some that work on the beach. Aquaculture is one of the few industries that's actually better than sustainable. It's regenerative, and so because an oyster will filter 40 or 50 gallons of water a day, they can take it to areas like the Chesapeake Bay or the Hudson River in New York City and actually use it to clean up and reestablish failing ecosystems. Right now, a lot of our oysters we grow in bags, and the other side of the barge slip here is where we do a significant amount of our bag work. Basically, the oysters, when they come to the farm, they come, we buy oyster seed from a hatchery, and it'll come like 10 million oysters about the size of a grapefruit. And then we have a small nursery in Shelton where we raise the oysters to a point where when we plant them on the farm, they won't just immediately get eaten by crabs or some other predator. And so when we put them out, we'll put them out in bags, not unlike the Chelsea gems. You probably saw some off-bottom bag culture there. And you can't really see it, but there's right out here, you can kind of see a tree or a stick that's kind of sticking up in the water here. And that kind of indicates where a lot of our tumble farm is, which is a lot of these bags in action. The native Olympia oyster became really popular during the gold rush in San Francisco. They ate all of the Olympias in San Francisco and then slowly worked their way up the coast to Olympia, where we shipped all of our oysters down there. And at some point somebody figured out that you could eat them a lot faster than you could grow them, and we should take a more measured approach to how it is that we are consuming shellfish, which is, as you all are going through your collegiate experience, maybe the question of our times, aside from affordable healthcare, is that how the planet can sustain the amount of people that are on it and a growth of that amount of people while not at the same time leading to sort of collapses of our different industries. And I don't want to make it too depressing, but what I can tell you is that seaweed and aquaculture are the ways out of the disaster. So from a grassroots standpoint, oysters to save the world. That's.
Taylor's, these are where our different operations are. We're, mostly our farms and our headquarters here in Washington State. We have about 14,000 acres of tidelands that we own or lease in locations all around the state. We have a hatchery nursery operation over in Kona, Hawaii, big nursery operation in Humboldt Bay in Northern California, and then a number of farms in British Columbia now as well. Greatest challenges with growing shellfish, it's the environment, it's water quality. In my opinion, I mean, like I said, that's where I spend so much of my time, is trying to keep water clean, where we grow as a company and an industry. Ocean acidification is a newer one. It's a big one. It's daunting. We, along with Hama and 4 other companies, are founding members of what's called the Shellfish Growers Climate Coalition. That's now grown to over 200 companies all around the country. They're using the stories about how climate change and changing ocean chemistry is impacting our businesses to try to educate policymakers and try to change the game when it comes to carbon policy. We do a lot of work with organizations on marine conservation, multiple NGOs and conservation groups. We've partnered with them over the years, fundraising events and tours, etc., particularly where they align with our efforts to protect water quality in the environment.
So we're harvesting and producing Mediterranean mussels. That's what we do here. This is an old oyster shucking plant. It was built back in the 1950s, I think it was. So it's getting up there in age. Seeded lantern net looks like. These are from the hatchery in Quilcene, Washington. It's Taylor's Shellfish hatchery, and oftentimes we take the brood stock, the parent stock, up there, or coordinate with Gordon, the manager, and he takes it up there and they spawn it. So we do a lot of cooperative work with our so-called competitor, Taylor Shellfish, to get the seed, and they've done they're great people to work with. This is what's called Deepwater Point, this point of land. And everything up the bay from Deepwater Point, we refer to it commonly as Oyster Bay. And it's much more shallow. It's a great spot for us because the outgoing tide from Oyster Bay has been heated up because it's so shallow. And especially in the spring and summer, it heats up. The sunlight penetrates all the way through the water column. So the primary productivity of plankton is just incredible. And all of that outgoing tide comes right through our farm. So we get first crack at it, our mussels do. So it's just a really rich soup. That's right, it's a true estuary, which creates even better conditions for plankton productivity, because all of these fish that are coming up here now, if they're not caught by the fishermen down there at the bridge, they're going to go upstream, they're going to spawn, they're going to die. There's all those carcasses, and of course the eagles will consume some, raccoons, but a lot of that flesh, that dying fish flesh, gets turned into nutrients that then get swept right back out here. So yeah, this is an incredibly productive bay for all kinds of shellfish. See, there's a lot of clams in here these days. This, I think, is a horse clam, but wouldn't really know until it grew a lot bigger. That is probably a native mussel, or what we call a trossless mussel. But these are all